Welcome to the Woodpreneur podcast, the number one podcast for the business and marketing side of the lumber, woodworking, hardwood flooring, and sawmill industry. I'm your host, Steve from Acres of Timber. Each week, we feature various wood business owners and entrepreneurs from around the globe. We share their stories, paths, insights so that you can network, learn, and grow your own wood business. Thank you so much for listening. Now enjoy the episode. The Woodpreneur podcast is proudly sponsored by Acres CRM. Acres CRM is the wood industry's only customer relationship management software dedicated to helping you automate your sales and marketing so that you can focus on serving your customers and growing your business. You can visit acresoftimber.com to learn more and to schedule a demo. Once again, that's acresoftimber.com. Hey, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Woodpreneur podcast. This is your host, Steve, and today's guest is Mark Spagnolo, also known as the Wood Whisperer. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me here.
I'm excited to have you on. I know a lot of people know you, but potentially my audience may not. Can you tell everybody what's your origin story? How'd you get to where you are right now and your journey into the wood industry?
Sure. Yeah, it could be a long, you want the short version or the long version?
The medium version. Yeah.
Okay. So I used to work in biotech in Southern California and kind of got to a point where I was really disenchanted with my job and started to woodwork as a hobby on the side. Over the course of a couple of years, I found that I really kind of found not only my knack for it, it was something that I was at least decent at. It was something that I had a misplaced passion for. Like I was in the world of science, was very unsatisfied with what I was doing there, but I found this woodworking thing to be incredibly appealing, so much fun to do. And it was great therapy for me when I would come home from basically an hour and 10 minutes each way was my commute at the time. So really, really annoying. So yeah, the woodworking was something I did on the side. Eventually got good enough at it that I started to really question what I was doing with my life. So made a pivot to become a custom furniture maker, probably very ill-advised at that time, but I didn't have kids. My wife had a stable job. It was something that she was really pushing me to do because she just wanted me to be happy, and it was early in our relationship. So she was, like, hey, go for it. So I did start a custom furniture business and did my best at that for quite some time and wasn't very good at it. I mean, I could make furniture, but the business side, as you know well, there's a lot more to it than being a good woodworker. So we wound up moving to Arizona for various reasons. I thought I might be able to have more success there with my business, and wound up getting a great shop and just having trouble making ends meet. And I mean, there's a lot of things I did to try to make that happen, but eventually got to a point where it was like a make or break thing. My wife was like, look, here's how much I need from you to be able to afford this house, right?
Yes.
So if you can't do this much, we've got problems. So I actually went back to work temporarily, working for other people. At that point, that was really difficult to do. I do feel like at a certain point when you have a taste of self-employment,
you're unemployable.
There it is. That's the exact word I was going to use. Yeah. You're not a good employee anymore.
No.
So I did my best.
You don't like to be told what to do, nor you don't want to ask for permission either.
Yeah. Yes. I did my best impression of an employee for a little while. And finally found some guy down in Phoenix who had a refinishing shop and had an opening for a part-time. And I'm like, well, there it is. There's the key. Get a part-time position, not only one that's bringing in a few bucks, and it was literally a few bucks, my own business. So I did that for a little while. And that's when I discovered this thing called a iPod video, I believe it was called at the time. I'm not sure what the release date, but it was when Apple first came out, pivoted from music to iPods with screens. And then the iPod video was this major thing. So I discovered not only audio podcasts at the time, and this is about 2006, not only audio podcasts, but this great thing of distributing video content via RSS feeds. And started to really get into some of the tech companies that were making videos at that time. And that was when I kind of had this epiphany that someone should be doing this for woodworking. And, kind of just dug in, did a little bit of research, not a lot of information out there at the time, because the barrier to entry was huge, especially compared to what it is today. So I finally put the effort in, found an old JVC camcorder that we had sitting around and figured it out and made my first goofy video and posted it online. This was pre-YouTube at the time, and it really took off. And I started to realize very quickly that, wow, not only is this fun, but this is actually going to be more profitable and more stable, if you could believe it, than what I was trying to do as a quote unquote custom furniture maker. So that was the beginning of the Wood Whisperer in 2006. And ever since then, it's just been an evolution of, creating content, writing books, doing events, all the things that come with that, as this industry has evolved in the last, 15 years.
It's so nuts, isn't it? Like,
it's crazy.
I'm excited because, just the idea that the narrative, that what you just said of people being unhappy in their day job, getting more fulfillment from working with their hands. And then if you're really all about it, there's this whole other community of people around you that they support each other. They support you. And there's like the stickers, and then people buying your plans. And then it's like you kind of have to figure that there's like millions of people out there that hate their job, but love to go into their shop and make stuff, right?
People can relate to that. Definitely.
That's fascinating. So so you started making stuff with, the Apple iPod video with the precursor to podcasts and YouTube, really, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What was the mindset around that time? Because I find that like a lot of like wood people just kind of have a hard time putting themselves out there. Were you always that type of person? I mean, you said you worked in biotech. Like, how'd you start developing this like brand of like the Wood Whisperer?
Well, the thing is, I'm naturally an introvert. I'm actually not very talkative. If I go to events, I have to force myself to be the guy that people want to hang out with, when in reality, I'd rather just like grab a beer, sit at a table and sit in the corner. I do love interacting with people, but it's a personal challenge as someone who's naturally introverted. So I have always had.
You want to crawl? You want to throw a cover over your head and just be alone in a cave for a little while?
Pretty much, yeah. I just want to go home.
Yeah. Same.
But that said, these events are great because I love connecting with people. But there's a lot of mental math that has to happen for an introvert to be comfortable doing these two things that they enjoy, with this chasm between them of their anxiety around just coming up with conversation to have with people that you just met.
For sure.
Things like that. So that was something that I fought for a long time in my life. Being in biotech, that's lab work. Not a whole lot of talking has to happen there. But I wound up working for a startup in Southern California that was growing very quickly. So when I was hired, I was basically the second person on the team. And when my boss was promoted, she was now out of the lab. I was running the lab. And then I got to be the guy who brought all the new people in, trained them. And what I discovered was that if I, number one, like a topic, but number two, am well studied on it, and I understand the topic, that I had a knack for explaining how things work. And my fear always came from not so much the fact that there's like a crowd of people in front of me, or now in this case, a virtual crowd of people in front of me. It always came from, do I know what I need to say? Do I understand this well enough that I could speak confidently on my toes and maybe pivot in the conversation, or have an inspired idea, go off script and come back to where I need to be? Can my brain work that way? And it turns out it does when I know what I'm talking about and I'm comfortable with the material. A lot of that anxiety and fear went away. So between that and the fact that, I mean, let's get serious, it was me, a camera, and my garage. So I could pretend to be whoever I wanted. If I want to be Mr. Outgoing, confident dude, I could totally do that on camera and push that out there. So over the course of the years, I feel like these things have met. The online persona I put out there was what I started with. And I think over time, that person kind of met in the middle with the natural introvert that I am to become who I am today.
Interesting. So you found that by focusing on what you can control is being liking what you're talking about, right? And being passionate about it. And then the second thing of being well read and knowing like, and part of it too is like comes with like the intricacies of knowing the ins and outs of what, in your case, it's like woodworking, right? And this culture behind it, right? The more you sort of and I'm sure one fed into the other. So the more that you learned about it and then you started implementing, the more passionate you became. And so that, probably, and then you said it's something else that was super interesting. You said it was you and a camera by yourself. You could be anybody that you wanted.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's like the whole thing we think about with online personalities. Are they really like that? And generally speaking, I think the cool thing is, having met a lot of the people who do what I do, a lot of these people, they are the same person. Maybe they're a more amplified person, or their personality gets amplified when they do the content that they create. But ultimately, very few of, at least anyone that I know of, no one's really pretending to be someone they're not. But they're turning the dial up a little bit, because that's what you have to do. We're also here not just to teach, but in a lot of cases, some people are just there to entertain. Well, you can't entertain if you're just, monotone and kind of, toned down. You got to amp it up a little bit. So
amp it up. Yeah.
So, and that was an acquired skill over time. It was something where I realized, always trying to balance, like, am I just woodworking instructor, or am I trying to make people have a good time? And where's the line on something like that? And over time, I just became a little bit better about knowing who I am, who I want to be, and making sure that the person I present in the videos is as accurate as possible for my real personality.
What was the gap between when you hit the bug to quitting your biotech job?
It was not very long, probably maybe a year and a half, I would say. So I
got a very fast addiction.
I got into the woodworking thing, started to acquire tools, and I started to spend way too much time in the shop. And with that commute, losing about almost 2.5 hours a day, my wife worked from home, and we just had this family conflict where my passion and need for that sort of therapeutic exercise to be in the shop was always conflicting with the fact that, well, she's been home all day, and what does she want to do? Go out to eat, go to the movies, like do something as a couple. And that was also part of her motivation for pushing me to follow my passion, was because it was affecting our relationship.
A lot of my clients and a lot of people that I've had on the podcast, like I keep harping on it, that like, it's hard for you to grow and pursue your passion if you're not in a relationship or have a support system that is pushing you, towards that, right? Like, you have this thing that's deep and yearning inside you, and like, you need somebody that's going to help validate a lot of your, doubts. I mean, like, or help motivate you towards the things that you truly want. That's amazing. So you started with the, making the videos. Like, at what point did like the following and the monetization come into play?
Well, the monetization was not a built-in like it is today. So if you start making videos, you get to a certain threshold of users, you can now start to earn revenue. That didn't exist. At the time, if you wanted to make money doing this, I think that's why I got a little more attention, for doing what I did when I did it, because the only way you could do this is the old school way. Like, the only model I had to work from at the time was to look at like PBS, for instance. So PBS will run their TV shows, and at the very beginning, it's always like, whatever show we're watching, the New Yankee Workshop is sponsored by this person and this person and this person, right? Like, there's four or five different sponsors.
But you have to grind to get those people.
Yeah, so that's exactly what you would have to do. You would have to contact them. And back then, 2006, you make that phone call to try to get someone in marketing. If you can get them, the first thing you have to do is explain what the heck a podcast is and what a video podcast is. They didn't know. And I said, look, if you guys want to get in on the ground floor on the internet, this was before companies got smart and started to make their own content. They didn't know how to do it. All they knew is if they wanted a video, like at that time, they would have to pay 50, 60 grand to some publishing house to produce a video about their product. So it was intriguing to them if they were open-minded, but a lot of these companies at the time would shut it down because the internet wasn't taken seriously as a place to put things like that. And there wasn't budget for online promotions like that. It just didn't exist. So we had to kind of create that.
2006, is that what you said?
Yeah. Well, in 2006, it didn't exist yet.
So 2006, people actually responded to their emails. Remember 2000?
hey, I was able to call multiple companies and get the VP of marketing on the phone.
Yeah, of course. People, it was different. And there was you had no following that people can, call you an influencer. There was nothing.
Yeah. That word didn't exist. I mean, a word existed, but not in the way it does now. And I didn't have an audience at the time where I could just even if I did, I go, hey, check me out over on this YouTube watch list. Like Blip TV was a company that we used at the time prior to and actually, now that I think about it, Apple's iTunes was the place where the content was pre-YouTube. But you would go, oh, we have this many downloads, this many thousand downloads, and this many views on our website. It was meaningless to them. They had nothing to compare that to. So it was more than what they currently had. And if you get the right person there, and luckily we did, that's when the monetization first happened, when we pitched a company, got them to say yes, and just moved forward as a show that had a sponsor, very much like the PBS model. And even today, 15 years later, we're still one of the only that I know of, producers of content that still has that sort of like yearly sponsor. Or
that's amazing. That's amazing.
It's not an ad by ad basis with these relationships, and we are moving toward that a lot more because that's a dying thing. But we still work with a company called Typebond. Last year we were still with Powermatic. These are companies we've been working with for a long time, and they're just a broad sort of umbrella sponsor. It's not in your face. It's the very first thing we say in the videos, and then we may not even mention it again for the rest of the video. And that's, doesn't really happen much anymore, but is a nice luxury because it's very stress-free.
Cool. Well, I mean, you have, been around a long time, and there's the credibility, there's the staying power, there's the commitment to the space that, that comes with being able to garner a year-long sponsorship, which is amazing. Kudos. So you got your sponsors, you're doing the podcast. When did you start thinking a little bit bigger and like having, Wood Whisperer as a brand? Because I remember a couple of years ago, I'd interviewed Matt Cremona, and he was telling me, he was like, I think he had just quit his job, and he was like, yeah, between YouTube and I sell my plans with Wood Whisperer, he was like, I'm doing well. And I'm like, what? And so it was fascinating. Like at what point did you get any, I like to ask this question. Did you get any help with growing and scaling your business and brand? Like, did you like mentors or coaches, or like who helped you think bigger?
Yeah, so I think it was mostly modeling what other people are doing in this space. Cool. And keep in mind, in 2006, when I say this space, I'm not talking about woodworking or making. That phrase didn't really exist either. In 2006, I was talking to other people who were in totally other categories because there were so few people making podcasts and videos. So, Workbench Con, that would have been like, there's no way that could have happened because there was only two of us at that time, right? So there were conferences back then, like podcast meetups, podcast expo, where it was focused on the whole industry of podcasting. And even then, that was a Workbench Con size crowd at those things, but that was all of podcasting. So at the time, I would look at successful podcasts that were, way more successful than we were, video podcast. And I say podcast back then, that included both video and audio. So I would watch what these people are doing, and we would go to these conferences where people would give advice how to like start a list for a newsletter, how to do that. Like, so those conferences did exist at the time in its infancy, but it was more broad terms. And this is how actually, one of the things that I love about what I do was being able to meet some really incredibly creative people that have nothing to do with woodworking. And I met them at those events, and they've since become great friends. But I think we had a little bit of an advantage there, was the fact that the tech industry was always steps ahead of us in terms of what they were doing with this platform. Woodworking, no one was doing it. So I could see what worked for them, and then kind of see, can I bring that element into what I do?
You'd model it for yourself. Yeah,
exactly. And it wasn't that obvious that I was just, honestly, just taking someone else's idea and then applying it to my thing, because our space was so limited and so small. If I took something from Tech TV and their stuff and applied that to what I'm doing, no one would know the difference. People would just be like, oh, this is cool. This guy's a woodworker doing the same thing these other people are doing.
Yeah. That's fascinating. And then So I guess maybe talk about what, your whole entire business is right now. Like what's the breadth of your empire?
Well, we've got quite a few things going on. So the Wood Whisperer is always the primary. That is our main site videos, our YouTube channel, Patreon campaign, everything associated with that. So that's the Wood Whisperer. We also have the Wood Whisperer Guild, which is basically like an online school featuring various instructors, including myself. You mentioned Matt Cremona. We've got quite a few builders there where we're basically creating courses, things that wouldn't play so well on a free environment like on YouTube, where we can take the time to go into detail. And for people who want basically a video instruction manual for how to build a piece of furniture, that's where they're going to get it in the guild. Pretty close to the beginning, around 2007, I started an audio podcast called Wood Talk. It was Wood Talk Online at the time. That became pretty redundant over time. So we just kind of reduced it to Wood Talk. And now, speaking to Matt Cremona again, he's one of my co-hosts, and my buddy Shannon Rogers. And that's like the longest running woodworking podcast that's been around.
How many episodes do you have?
I'm sorry?
How many episodes do you have?
Oh, geez. We just published 520 something, I think 520. Yeah. And we've gone through, different phases. In the beginning, it was very loose. We would just be like, oh, you want to do a show tonight? Okay, let's do a show tonight. And we may or may not get an episode out. Eventually, we got a little more serious. Then we quit for a little while because it was just too much. And then we came back, and now we produce about 2 shows a month. So the number's not climbing super fast, but it's sustainable at this point, which is the most important thing. So I did the Wood Talk show, and that was never really a big revenue generator for us. It was just a passion that was super fun to do. In the past couple of years, we did get a sponsor. Again, speaking of that yearly sponsorship sort of thing, which is kind of a holy grail, I think, of sponsorships. We've been working with Rockler for a couple of years now. Cool. That relationship is fantastic. Love those guys. And it's just easy. It's an easy show to do. It's easy to be, to work with them. And the audience seems to identify well with that. They're a perfect sponsor for the show. And I've got, merchandise and things. I've written a couple of books. We sell those books. There's of course always the sort of passive revenue that happens with advertising and AdSense, and the little bit of website traffic we still get on our website, which always seems to be going in a downward trend because everybody's just consuming content elsewhere. For sure.
Yeah. Do you, when you think about the sort of where you'd like to take your business, where would you like to be?
That's a tricky one for me, because of the nature of how I started. Everything was bootstrapped, so I find myself at IWF in Atlanta sitting around a table, with Johnny Brook and April Wilkerson and Matt and a couple other people going, wow, they're all way ahead of me in terms of, I'm not just talking about numbers, I'm talking about how well they run their businesses. They all have editors. They all have assistants in the shop, like stuff that I have been supermaning this thing since day one, because that's the way you do it. Like there was something about it when you started podcast in 2006, part of the charm was the fact that you were everything. You were in front of the camera, you were behind the camera, you were behind the editing, you did everything. And I was scared to lose that. So, for me, like even at that time, I felt I was really behind, and I eventually did learn from that. And I wound up getting an editor. We have a fantastic editor is just absolutely fantastic at his job, makes my job so much easier. And I should have done it a long time ago, but I was the last one to apply general smart business sense to this whole thing. You don't have to do everything. Exactly. And just letting go of some stuff. So that's why I say today in 2022, where's my business going? It's really tricky for me to say, because I feel like I have a limited view on where, like, changes I need to make. How big do I want to get? Most of what I do with managing my business is tamping things down and not. So basically my goal is to be as profitable as we can, to continue having the lifestyle that I want. If I want to, after we're done here, I'm going to the gym because I want to. I don't have to work this afternoon. That's the kind of lifestyle that I want. And I want to be able to, pick up my kids from school and not feel like I'm missing something. So I'm trying to be as successful and as profitable as I can, keeping the few employees that we do have very happy, very well paid, very gratified in the work that they do. And if I can keep that small while maximizing profits, that's my goal. And I want to keep doing more of that. I admire stuff that when people are buying buildings and they're hiring multiple people and they're increasing their production rate and they have 2 videos a week. And like, that's fantastic. But I don't think at this point in my career, I don't think that's where I want to be. That sounds like a lot of work to me.
It does. Yeah. It's interesting too. Like, I talk to a lot of people. I even talk to my clients. I'm like, like at least for you have multiple revenue streams, but it's all literally one feeding and leveraging off of the other. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like, it's not like you're going out of left field and started making another thing. Right. And so like one piece of content, one relationship, one conversation can spread into everything. Right. But like, really it all comes down to like, your core, right? Like what's your core vision? And it seems like for you, your core vision and your core sort of objective is really about empowering the woodworker and building community around them, right? Like you're giving them the community, you're giving them access to you and your insights, you're giving them courses, and overall you're helping them to become a better woodworker.
Yeah,
right?
I would say so.
That's great. And then, even for me, like I've had podcast sponsors, some of them that were clients. And then for me, I was like, I actually just recorded a commercial today. And I'm like, what I love about what you're saying is like, a lots of times you need to keep creating and investing in yourself, because the more you do that, so like, I don't need a podcast sponsor because I got other businesses that I can promote on my podcast. Right. Yeah. It's kind of the same thing for you. It's like, you're talking about you're on one show, then you can promote this other thing. And so you have everything sort of feeding one another. Right.
Yeah. And that's the ideal setup for this. It's, people, there was a point, I don't know how many years ago, but there was a point where companies realized this whole content marketing is what they would call it. Right. So it's like, how do we market our products, building content? And that's why, like, so I've been at this for maybe 15 years. I would say grand total, how much I've spent on advertising my own stuff, like promoted posts, whatever it is less than $500.
Wow.
Right. Because why do I need to do that? At least it's getting to the point now where it's hard, where the platforms make it very difficult to access your own audience. So it's very tempting. But ultimately, the advertising was just built in to what we were doing. Every podcast I did promoted my videos. Every video I do could potentially promote my podcast. And you don't reach as many people as if, when you open up the gates a little bit by doing advertising. But at least during the growth phase, for my business, that was something that just worked really well for me. And everything did feed everything else at that time.
It's fascinating. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, and now it's getting super tricky to decide what to do, because we are super fortunate where we are. And I don't know if you've paid attention to any of my recent stuff, but our longtime sponsor was Powermatic, and we recently lost them. The good thing is that I was, thankfully smart enough to structure this business in such a way where if that should happen, because I kind of expected it to happen 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So like every single year I was like, okay, I don't think this might be the last year. Let's plan. It was no big deal. And now I'm at the point where I'm being very selective. I've got numerous offers for new sponsors. And the reality is I kind of don't want them. They're great companies. Yeah. It's not a question of the quality of the company. It's a question of, do I want that headache? Or sure. Can I actually, add to my core thing like you were talking about, my core purpose for being here? If I don't have a sponsor, I actually can make content that might be a little bit more spicy, a little bit more interesting, and serve that core audience. And maybe that's what I should be doing. So that's kind of one of the things business-wise that I'm thinking about, is leaving money on the table and how tricky that can be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I have friends that are like professional athletes, and one of them is a pro skateboarder, and he's like, everything that he wears, everything that he drinks, everything that he like, from his board to his wheels to his trucks to his sneakers to like, well, not his sneakers, but everything on him, and even what he drinks, what he uses, he has a piece of.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I was like, oh, that's like, and I still, so like, as I recorded my podcast today, I was like, oh, it's for my, my woodworking, like my wood business CRM software. I was like, That's what I'm going to promote. Why would I promote anybody else when I can promote myself?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
That's
for sure.
that's cool. So this is super fascinating, especially because like I've had other like Vic Teslin, you know him?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a different, it's like a different is a different hustle in the woodpreneur space, right?
Mhm.
Content creator, maker, not even a it's not even, you're more than a content creator. It's like you're a media brand. That's literally what you are. You're a media
Yeah.
brand. And you know what's fascinating about that is that like there is so much more. There's like so there's more, there's room for other people
Yeah.
in the space, right?
There always is.
Always, right? So it's not like, there's more room for podcasts, there's more room for YouTubers. It's
Mhm.
like, because everybody has their own thing. You have your own audience, I have my own audience, and what people would resonate with you wouldn't resonate with me, and vice versa, right? And so
Yeah.
um that's cool, man. Hey, so this is a part of the show where I give you any marketing or business advice. Is there anything that you need to work through or think through? Money that you're leaving on the table that I could help you out with?
Yeah. I mean, sure. We can sort of just trying to think of things that I'm pondering recently. And a lot of it is around the concept of growth. And something that's happening these days is with people like me who have a pretty large library, historical library of content, is
Yeah.
there's a lot of people. I sort of see them as like circling buzzards in a way, like they see there's still meat on the bone and that they could do something with it that I can't.
Ah,
And these companies come along and want to partner with you, and
yeah.
that can exist in many forms, whether it's taking a piece of everything or they want equity in your company, whatever that is. But we field those things all the time, and that's something where I always get very apprehensive about. And I mean, truthfully, at this point, I kind of know where I want to go with this stuff, but I would be curious to hear your perspectives on things like getting an offer from someone who wants to just take your content to the next level by investing. And I think it's part of like the Superman mentality that I want to do
Yeah.
everything. The thought of splitting however many percent of revenue with some other company is very, very difficult for me to wrap my head around as a
Yeah.
bootstrapping, business. So, I mean, do you think that is something that people who are in a position where they built their brand up enough, they've got a decent library, and now they get that call from a company that says, "Hey, we love what you do, but we want to help you take this to the next level, and we've
Yeah.
got money to make that happen." Like that, it's going to be it's going to be a golden handcuffs kind of situation with these companies. But like, should people do that? Is that good?
I was just in Dallas the other day talking to somebody about like this almost precise thing. And lots of times it all depends on who the partner is that
Mhm.
is doing it. And because you put in your 10,000 hours into your content, it is super valuable and is very emotional, right? Like
Yeah.
it's your thing. And so I don't know, my gut says no, right? Like to those types of situations, because again, it'll take a certain type of company and a certain type of partner that will really truly understand. Like sure, you can probably get like an extra, six figures a year, couple $10,000, $5,000 a month, but like to me, you're in this for the long term.
Right.
And I would dive, if I were you, I would dive more deep into your community. Like I would dig into like who exactly your audience is and what they are, and then serve from there.
Yeah.
And from a timing perspective, sure, you may not have the time and enjoy going to the gym and picking up your kids from school, because like I like to do that too, right? But like maybe it's like a quarterly thing or two times a year. Like I have friends that I had a friend that worked at McDonald's, right?
Hmm.
And he was saying, like he was like, McDonald's does two things a year that are big outside of their core business, right? And so
Okay.
like maybe take that approach, right? Is like I have one major project a year that I do,
Hmm.
right? Or two major projects. And it's something maybe you bring on some outside people, but it's short term. They don't own your stuff,
Right.
right? you hire them on a project basis, and maybe you have a launch around it, or maybe it's like repackaging some of your old things, like taking your best-selling YouTube videos
Right.
and maybe making like a curated playlist, or like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, there's other ways to do it that are not so deeply far reaching into,
yeah,
being tied together.
I mean, the only way that I would truly, like, if I were you and I had 15 years in this,
Yeah.
the only way that I would truly do it is like if somebody came in and just said, you know what, I'm going to give you a big ass check.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? It's got to be sizable enough. Like, I've had somebody that wanted to buy my Instagram account. I'm like, no, there's no way that I'm like, there's no way.
I have to laugh when I see those. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
No,
Like,
but this one was a serious person. Like, this,
yeah,
it wasn't one of those,
it's
but
legit.
it was like a legit offer. And I was like,
Yeah.
and I threw out a ridiculous number, and they were like, and I was like, there's no way I wouldn't even sell it, because it's my connection to my community.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
How could you sell it?
I'm not here for money. I'm here to serve, and I want to do it in an authentic way. Right.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
like, again, if it was, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and they came to you and they said something, that's different.
So you're definitely different.
It's a different tone, right?
Mhm.
So like the deal that Jimmy DeResta is doing, like Jimmy DeResta is like on fire right now, right?
Mhm.
Like those are good deals, right? It showcases him in a different way. He gets
Yeah.
bigger, broader reach. He's on Roku, he's on Netflix, right? Like those are big deals. And so for me, it's like I wouldn't do those. Personally, I wouldn't do those deals, because you could end up doing it yourself and not have to give up any equity.
Well, that's one of the things that I've done as well, is when this company contacts me, they're always name dropping who they have successful campaigns with, who they're working with. And then really the secret is like, go to those channels, look at what they're doing, and then find another way to do that internally. You don't necessarily need to share equity to pull that stuff off.
No,
right?
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of times too, people are so thirsty to like make it,
Yeah. To
that
be
like, I mean,
successful.
I just got out of a business that I started, 18 years ago, and to do this more, to do Acres of Timber more. And I was like, you got to do something because you love it. And if
Yeah.
you love it, you don't care how long it takes to get there. As long as you're making money, you're comfortable, you're doing what you need to do, like enjoy the ride, right? Like,
Yeah.
and just continue to build. So
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
cool. So any last bit of parting advice for the Woodpreneur community?
Well, work hard. I think that you just touched on it. Really, it's passion. I think especially speaking from the content creation side of things, if your passion isn't there, or if your passion is simply tied to numbers and money, it's going to dry up at some point. There's a reason why, 15, almost 16 years into this, I'm still, as soon as we're done here, while I am going to go to the gym. I actually have some stuff I need to do first, but I'm really excited to see what I'm working on right now in the shop. That's my favorite time, is to be in the shop. I refer to everything else I have to do for my business. That's work. But the woodworking, that's not work. That's the fun stuff. I still love it. And if I wasn't doing shows about this and making videos, I would still be trying to spend most of my spare time in there because I'm passionate about it. So like, you could very easily, especially today in the content world, you can get burnt out very easily just trying to keep up with what other people are doing. It's ridiculous. So if you have that core passion there and you don't ever do too much to sacrifice that passion by becoming sort of beholden to the content and the algorithms, as long as you could avoid that, the passion will always drive you, and you'll always have a reason to get up in the morning, get out there, make some great videos, and make some great woodworking while you're at it. So I would say just make sure you know what your passion is and continue to follow that, not blindly, but follow it with the knowledge that you may have to pivot. You may have to do things a little bit differently, but you got that core there all the time, is that drive to make the thing you love to make. And if that's there, you should be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much, Mark. Hey, I got one more sort of tip for you. And I got this because I met this guy. I interviewed this guy and he did the same exact thing. He had a very robust YouTube following. And what he did was he took all of his videos and he broke them up into reels.
Oh, okay.
So you can take a lot of your YouTube stuff, resize it, and like you can probably take one of your whatever 10-minute, 15-minute videos, cut it down to 1 minute, add some copy on it, make them reels. You can outsource that. Like,
so this, I don't want to get us off on a tangent. If we're done here, this could be a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
But there is a company that we are working with that helps us with that, because I knew that was something we needed to do. But it was also something that I was not very good at. Recropping 16:9 footage for like a vertical platform. It's always a sacrifice. It never looks as good as purpose made. But if you're good at it, there are ways to do things, and it's a lot of work to convert one of those old videos to that format. So we actually do partner with a company that helps us specifically with that, because I knew that was beyond my desire and ability. So that is something that I absolutely agree. And if you have the means to work with a company that can help you with that without selling your soul, it's a good thing to do.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark. On Instagram, how can people follow you?
Yeah, I'm Wood Whisperer on Instagram. Pretty much any place you type in Wood Whisperer or the Wood Whisperer, you're going to probably find us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Have a great one.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much for listening to the Woodpreneur podcast, the #1 podcast for the business and marketing side of the lumber, woodworking, hardwood flooring, and sawmill industry. If you like what you heard, please give us a 5-star rating and review. You can also tap into our community by visiting woodpreneurlife.com. Once again, that's woodpreneurlife.com.